Hi folks, and welcome to a more impromptu video where I wanted to respond to YouTube Christian apologist Braxton Hunter, despite the fact that I largely agree with his video posted today about what kind of atheist are you. Braxton talks about categories of atheism put forward by atheist philosopher William Rowe, where it describes an atheist's disposition towards the rationality of theism. The scale ranges from unfriendly atheism, where they believe theism is irrational and unjustified, or indifferent atheism, where they have no beliefs about the rationality of theism, to friendly atheism, where the atheist says that while theists are wrong, they can be rationally justified in their theistic beliefs. Braxton continues by saying internet atheism and new atheism are the equivalent of unfriendly atheism, and he proceeds to critique that view by pointing out the atheistic giants of philosophy of religion all readily concede that theism is rational. He then invites atheists to be friendly atheists in their disposition towards the rationality of theism. By and large, I agree with Braxton here. I think theism is rationally justifiable, even where I think it is false. I also have to admit that when I started working on my channel, I was certainly more in the unfriendly atheist camp. I've changed my views because I've grown. I think a lot of anger as a newly convinced Christian apostate certainly fuels that sort of a view, but the cold, hard study of philosophy of religion certainly tempers that if one aims to be fair when looking at how the field works. I want to be clear about what I'm not saying. I am not saying that I find any of the arguments for God's existence to be convincing. In fact, I really don't like the scale Braxton references in his video as a way to gauge one's non-belief in God, say at -100, to agnosticism, 0, to theism, +100. I'm still firmly at -100. Nothing about the traditional arguments for theism or Christianity give me the slightest pause or nudge the number towards theism. I can literally counter all of them, and I find theistic responses to those arguments against God's existence to be entirely unconvincing. Part of me wants to self-censor so that I might better extend the olive branch of peace, and I'm certainly trying to extend that olive branch. But I don't want to lie about how I feel on the matter. I don't think it means that I'm failing to take these theistic arguments seriously, as Braxton says of unfriendly atheists. Yet I also readily grant that theism is rational, and that theists and atheists need to find some way to make peace with one another. This needs to be reconciled. My feelings on the matter are that any arguments for or against God's existence is a matter of metaphysical debate. Like other areas of philosophical debate, there is quite literally no way to adjudicate metaphysical debates other than showing one position as logically incoherent. Still, even then, it is not hard for anyone to modify their metaphysical views to resolve the contradiction once it is shown, and then to get much of the same original view that they had to start with. For instance, if I were to point out a contradiction in a Christian theological view of omnipotence or omniscience, I do not expect the theologian to renounce their theism. They would just as likely thank me for my contribution to their work, and then amend their understanding of the problematic concept, and then go right along being theists. The dirty secret here is that much the same can be done by theists to atheists, and the atheists can just as readily amend what views they have that were shown to be wrong, and then go right along our merry way being godless heathens. I can't prove my atheism, they can't prove their theism. So should we all just be agnostics? I don't think so. The issue with metaphysical debate is that ultimately one looks at the arguments presented, and then you identify what seems more or less plausible to you, and then you follow that path. For me, arguments from hell, hiddenness, the argument from heaven, and of course evil, all end up being decisive reasons to reject theism. When it comes to arguments for theism, I simply find the variety of rebuttals too convincing for the arguments to have any weight. The olive branch that I want to extend comes in acknowledging that this is my subjective perspective. As much distaste as I have for specific religions, if I'm going to take my views about metaphysical arguments seriously, I have to grant that any Jew, Christian, Muslim, Mormon, Buddhist, or Hindu is as justified as I am in evaluating these arguments on their own terms. So yes, my dear godless heathen friends, please, let us be friendly atheists. But let's not be doormats either. While I agree with Braxton, I feel the need to point out that new atheism isn't the only party at fault here. A brief survey of apologetic literature for nearly any religion, but certainly Christianity, will find calls about how atheism is irrational, or that it is unreasonable, or that it takes more faith to be an atheist. In fact, the more conservative the apologist, the more likely one is to find this view. Popular level apologetic books are rife with this kind of thing. There's no nuanced acknowledgement about how the other side is rational in their objections. If anything, strawmen are just as hastily constructed and burned in apologetics books as they are in YouTube atheist videos. How many times have you heard apologists claim that atheists have to believe everything came from nothing? Even the kings of apologetics, like William Lane Craig, are not immune from this criticism. While too smart to say something as indefensible as atheism is irrational, the nuance found in sober philosophy of religion books is nowhere to be found in his debate videos or popular works. His overconfident approach is really part of his trademark. The moral argument he has defended for decades is a great example. Craig is well aware of Platonism or non-natural moral realism, to name two atheist-compatible moral realist views. Yet he has contended for decades that the atheist has no basis for objective morality. Oh sure, Craig believes that those views have problems and counterarguments. He also seems to pretend that his moral realist position does not suffer its own set of problems and counterarguments because he has answers to those objections. Well, the issue is that defenders of other views can answer his objections just as readily, and they find Craig's answers to their objections just as unconvincing as he finds theirs. The more defensible moral argument is where one says that theism offers a better explanation of objective moral values. You'll notice that Craig will use that kind of argument when dealing with more philosophically formidable opponents, but he still uses the other one in his popular level books and debates. This is a great example of exactly how metaphysical debates about thorny topics like the ontological ground of morality boil down into argumentative stalemates settled only at the subjective level of intuition that we are all stuck with. Our great intellectual champions of theism and atheism, all they do is carefully explore the options available and show how they can build a coherent web of philosophical views that is defensible. All sides of the debate can do this, and it's high time we all cut the crap and presented the argumentative battlefield for what it actually is. I can't emphasize that last point enough, and I want to explain why it's important we acknowledge the rationality of our ideological opponents' positions and start extending olive branches all around. We're too polarized, and these divisions are harming all of us. I'm posting this video merely 5 days before the U.S. presidential elections in what is an extremely volatile situation where people on both sides are afraid the other won't concede defeat in anything but a blowout. What undergirds so very many of our differences, especially in the culture war issues that are at the literal heart of why Christians largely stand behind Republicans and the atheists or nuns largely back the Democrats, is that it breaks down along the lines of our base assumptions about reality. Our irreconcilable notions of what it means to live the good life, or our basis for morality, will drive wedges between our views on abortion, LGBTQ rights, drug use, and even how the justice system should be utilized. We are not like other countries, where one side has an unshakable electoral advantage, and so can dominate to the point where these issues are no longer wedges. We have got to learn to find amicable ways to split our differences, or we will end up in a bad place as a people and a country. This is not easy. Most, if not all of these issues seemingly can't be reconciled, which is why politicians find them so useful as wedges to divide us. But if we are going to find a way to get through this, we are all going to have to recognize where the fault lines are at the heart of this, identify the subjective stalemate of the debate, and start being friendly atheists and friendly theists. Because we can't even start to have the conversation about how to resolve these issues and coexist peacefully until we take that very first step.